Welcome to this event, everybody. This is part of our K2 series of knowledge sharing events from the London Progression Collaboration. I'm Anna Ambrose, I'm founder and director of the LPC, and just briefly to introduce ourselves for anyone who hasn't come across us before, the LPC is a not-for-profit initiative addressing unequal access to good work. Since we launched in early 2020, we've been supporting small and medium-sized employers in London to create new apprenticeships for disadvantaged and marginalised Londoners. We've created around 1,500 apprenticeships since then, including leveraging around £15 million in unspent levy funds from our very generous network of large employer supporters. Thank you for joining us for this discussion about unlocking apprenticeship levy for social impact. And thank you especially to our panel for today. We're really delighted to be joined by Rob Powell, Deborah Adams, Valerio Aureliano, and Echo, who's an apprentice from Evolve, who'll be speaking a little bit later on as well. And I will let them all introduce themselves shortly. So just to start with a couple of housekeeping points before we get started, please do use the Q&A if you have questions for our panel, and we'll be keeping an eye on these and collating them for later on this morning. Feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves and for any general discussion, but we can't promise to pick up questions from there. So do please use the Q&A for anything that you'd like us to see. If you're on social media, if you're tweeting this morning, please use the hashtag LPCK2 and do include our handle in your tweets. We're at LPC_progression, that's LPC_progression, or include us in any LinkedIn post about today's event as well. So by way of a little bit of kind of scene setting, I guess, for our discussion today, I was at a roundtable last week with Lord Blunkett. And the agenda was focused on ensuring that apprenticeship funding is sustainable, with headlines around underspends and overspends and all of these things. And it really quickly became clear that you can't talk about apprenticeship funding and the budget and all of those things without actually taking it back to discussing what impact we want that funding to have, and in essence, what we think apprenticeships are for. And the thing is about a system which is so completely employer-led as the one we have at the moment, and you might think that's a great thing, you might think that's not. But one of the things about that is that it's really not clear from a policy perspective, like what the answer is to that question, what we want apprenticeships to be for. There aren't really any kind of levers in the system to nudge apprenticeships towards fulfilling a specific set of objectives, whether that's around a kind of social set of objectives, whether that's around skills shortages or business productivity or whatever that might be. What apprenticeships achieve, and therefore by extension the impact that the apprenticeship levy can have, is down essentially to thousand upon thousand of individual employer decisions, as someone put it last week. And maybe that's a problem. I'd suggest in the context of kind of falling entry-level apprenticeships, regional disparities, all these things, that perhaps that's not an ideal situation to be in. But equally, I think we can think of that as a really empowering thought on one level. Like, to be completely oversimplistic for a moment, if we want to support sectors with dire skills shortages, if we want to support the creation of lots more entry-level roles, if we want to support greater diversity in specific sectors, well, we can each use our organisation's apprenticeship levy funds to do just that. It is within our gift to do that. And partly, of course, that's about what organisations do internally with their own funds and their own programmes. And we've heard at previous K2 events that we've hosted from lots of employers and training providers doing really great work, creating routes into employment for young people and for those from disadvantaged and marginalised backgrounds. Also, clearly, there are lots of factors that affect that in terms of organisational priorities, capacity, etc., all of which influences the way organisations have to juggle issues of kind of quality and quantity. But today, we're really going to talk about taking that a step further and thinking really carefully, particularly about the potential to make social impact with even more apprenticeship levy funds in terms of what we can do with those unspent funds. And it's really important. We hear a lot about the fall in apprenticeships for young school leavers and entry levels, but perhaps a little bit less about what I tend to think of as the kind of third bit of an overlapping Venn diagram, which is the fact that apprenticeships offered by non-levy paying businesses, so SMEs, have fallen by around 40 to 45%. A lot of the work we do is around unlocking apprenticeship levy funding to address that, and working hand in hand with levy paying employers to drive social impact through what would otherwise be unused levy funds. So that's our kind of backdrop for today's discussion. And so if I could come to our panel, first of all, just to introduce yourselves and your organisation briefly and share just a quick perspective on why you think that we should be thinking about the apprenticeship levy in terms of the social value it can deliver and where that fits in for your organisation. That would be great. So Deborah, if I could come to you first.
That's fine. Good morning, everybody. So I'm here as an employer engagement coordinator representing London Borough of Hounslow. We tend to use apprenticeship levy to help our burgeoning micro businesses. We have a very large micro business and SME community to help them actually upskill their existing staff as well as take on new talent. We find that helps them sort of create loyalty within their own businesses. And, actually help them grow their own talent. So, and to employ people locally. So that's when it really works. And, we're trying to build back since the pandemic, and it's working really well for us.
Thanks, Deborah. And Valeria, if we could come to you just to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Valeria. I am the Performance and Operations Manager at Evolve Apprentices. Evolve is a not-for-profit organization that manages the CATV shared apprenticeship scheme, and we're also a flexi-job apprenticeship agency. We're also a social enterprise, so our vision is that inequalities in the workplace are reduced to ensure that all people have access to quality employment and training opportunities. Unfortunately, in the construction industry, similar to other sectors, the apprenticeship starts are still below pre-pandemic level, and we know how important apprenticeships are, specifically for construction industry. We know that many professionals in management positions have started as an apprentice. We know that 90% of apprentices will stay in employment after completing the course. We know that 67% will stay with the same employer. So at Evolve, we strongly believe that apprenticeships are the way to tackle the construction skills shortage crisis. And this couldn't be achieved without the help of LPC and our donors. Since we worked with LPC from 2020, with the help of 16 donors who have donated over £900,000, we have employed 77 apprentices in the construction industry. Currently, Evolve has 50 apprentices in London, Birmingham, and West Midlands. And in the last decade, we have employed and placed over 200 apprentices.
Thanks, Valeria. And Rob, if I could come to you.
Thank you, Anna. Good morning, everybody. I'm Rob Powell. I'm the Director of Pro Bono and Corporate Responsibility at Weil, Gottschall and Manges. We're a US law firm headquartered in New York. I'm based in the London office and oversee our internal ESG framework. I think, in terms of, and I can talk more about, what we've done at Weil later on. I think, any organization, if you want to improve and kind of scale up your social impact or social value, you need to pull on as many levers that you have at your disposal, and levy transfer as a levy paying employer is undoubtedly one of those, and it's really easy to do. So if there's any employers on this webinar today who have yet to transfer some of their levy, I would strongly encourage you to do so, and the LPC is there to kind of help facilitate that.
Thanks, Rob. And we always like hearing it's easy. That's definitely a good thing to hear. Thank you. So the LPC supports both Weil and Hounslow to transfer unspent levy funds. Rob, can you talk a little bit more for us about why you decided to do this and how you've kind of gone about thinking about what you want those funds to achieve and where you want to kind of place that support?
Yeah, of course, Anna. So we began working with the LPC because we developed an apprenticeship standard, which I'll talk more about a bit later on, the corporate responsibility and sustainability level 4 practitioner. And we worked with the LPC to launch that apprenticeship standard and to encourage large employers to, in addition to recruiting a CRS practitioner level 4, but also to consider transferring some of their unspent levy. And of course, because Weil kind of led that initiative, then Weil, we had to transfer some of our own levy. And I guess, you know, for us, and you know, from my kind of personal experience, we wanted to, because it was just literally during or just on the back of the pandemic, that was kind of at the forefront of our minds. So we weren't particularly strategic about where the funding went in terms of aligning with our kind of ESG strategy, I guess. We were more concerned about how do we support small to medium-sized employers who have really been hit during the pandemic. And, you know, the two areas which we all know about was hospitality and care. So we actually directed and channeled our unspent levy to those two sectors, and we funded, I think it was at that time, I think it was 11 care workers and 2 hospitality workers, and it was just so easy to do, and that's because of the LPC. But you know, I should add, I went to the event at the Shard for the LPC celebration event during National Apprenticeships Week, and there was a great case study on that event with CVC and one of their charity partners, and they'd taken a very strategic approach, which I loved, and I think employers, that's the beauty of levy transfers, that you can, you know, some just want to get it out the door because use it or lose it kind of type mindset, or you can think, how do we can take our time and do something very additionally impactful and strategic, and that's what I would like Weil to be doing next.
Brilliant, thanks Rob. And Deborah, if I could come to you, can you just tell us a little bit about how levy transfer kind of fits in terms of wider priorities for the borough for you?
Okay, so the manifesto, the manifesto that we're currently working on, so we have a thriving pillar. So we're actually supporting really our businesses to actually sort of recover really more from the pandemic. We are building a very strong guarantee for our young people who might be disadvantaged and unable to secure work at this time, by actually building a lot more resilience into them through employment and skills. So rather than, you know, maybe being in college and actually having to leave to look for a job, it's about an apprenticeship having sort of both of those options there, really. So, and it's about building a stronger community. So.
Lovely, thank you. And I think you've got a specific example of one of the organisations that you're levy supporting that you were going to tell us about.
Yes, so we're supporting a day nursery called the North Star Day Nursery, and their ambition is to support people who might be children actually who are disadvantaged and maybe known to social care, and you know, sort of maybe come up through a children's refuge or something like that. And you know, that levy transfer really helps support people actually working in that nursery. And you know, their ethos is actually not to charge parents. So, you know, we've supported a number of new starts there, younger and older people, and it's worked really well. So we're building a lot more resilience there.
Brilliant, thanks Deborah. I think it's really interesting with those examples. You know, we see the large levy payers that we work with, you know, thinking in so many different ways about how they want to make that kind of social impact with their funds, whether it's based on kind of skill shortages in a particular sector, whether it's based on you know, a particular kind of geographical footprint which is really meaningful for them, or whether it's around particular you know, particular disadvantaged or marginalized groups that are perhaps kind of reflecting in their own kind of EDI strategy internally as well. And you know, as you mentioned Rob, those who are looking to kind of do projects with charity partners. So all these different ways that we see large levy payers thinking about, you know, what is it that's going to make our levy transfer meaningful for us, and you know, others who are very much aware of what it means for their staff to be able to get to work, whether that's accessing childcare or social care or all those things. So I think it's really fascinating, you know, the very different ways that that businesses are thinking about that.
Can I just add, Anna, as
Yeah,
well?
do.
Just on that point. So, I think there's a fine balance as well. So, we've talked about being kind of strategic and having a real focus for where you transfer levy. But then also the other side is let's just support particular sectors that have been hard hit during the cost of living or the pandemic, etc. And essentially having a mindset of it's not that important that it aligns with our own ESG or social value strategy. We just want to use these levies in a positive way. I think, you could be quite rigid and think, well, the care setting or the care sector doesn't really align with our social value strategy. So, like, why would we want to give it there? And I think that's, I think levy transfer is quite unique in that, you can actually impact sectors that you wouldn't necessarily usually align with. And actually, with that example, who has more social impact than somebody who works 14 hours a day looking after elderly, vulnerable people in a care home? Like, I mean, that is the ultimate social value and impact. So I think that there's a balance, and what I'm trying to say is don't be too rigid in whatever you choose to do.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, one of the fascinating bits of our job, I suppose, is kind of balancing that sort of supply and demand of, making sure that we can get funds where they're really most needed. So, yeah, that's great to hear. Thank you. Valeria, if I could come to you, you're kind of at the other end of this. You mentioned that Evolve has been a recipient of levy transfer funding. So it'd be lovely to hear about how those funds are helping you to make an impact for your learners and, how that fits in terms of all the wider support that you offer as well.
Definitely. As I mentioned, we are a social enterprise, therefore social impact is at the core of what we're doing. For example, supporting candidates from disadvantaged backgrounds is a big focus for Evolve. Therefore, we partner and recruit via several social value organizations such as Women Construction, Build People, Youth Build, DWP, Job Centres, and many others. We also work very close with the local authorities, construction companies, and training providers to ensure greater social impact by tackling those barriers to employment. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today, because I do want to express how genuinely grateful we are every time we receive a transfer for an apprentice. Because I've worked in the industry for about 5 years now in construction and in digital marketing, and I see the apprenticeship world as this big holistic system that is invisible yet very powerful. Like, there's us here as the employer who look after our apprentices. We provide the care, the pastoral support is essential for us. There's our host companies who provide that hands-on experience. There's a training provider that we work very close with to make sure that the apprentices will master each unit. There's the local authorities that we work very close to make sure that the local residents receive best opportunities in employment and training. There's LPC, there's the levy donors who support us fund that training. And at the end, there's the apprentice who's got a path in front of her that can be 2 years, 4 years, and the dream at the end of it that she needs to achieve. And I don't think this can be done unless all these parties come to work together. And sometimes we may be oblivious of each other, but we're still so interdependent. And I've got the pleasure to introduce you to Echo, who's our level 3 business admin apprentice. She's worked with Evolve since 2021. Currently, Echo is between placements, therefore she could allocate some time today to share with you her experience as an apprentice. Echo? Anna, you know.
Hi, Echo. Wonderful to have you on the call. Thank you. So could you tell us a little bit about what you were doing before your apprenticeship and a bit about your apprenticeship experience so far?
Yeah, so before I was an apprentice, I was in and out of jobs. I was a nail technician, body piercer. Just my health made it very difficult for me to find where I actually fit in as well. And I think I sat there for a while. I was unemployed, and it took me a good few months, and then I finally found Evolve, doing free job search on Indeed. Finally found Evolve and see that it was a construction apprenticeship. Obviously, that was quite out of everything I'd done, and I just thought, yeah, I'll take the leap, and I took the leap and managed to get there, and it's been amazing ever since. I've been able to get so much help, from coming from nothing, completely from construction, no apprenticeships, and they've just been so helpful, and I've managed to get 2 placements now, and the amount of experience I've gained, my college, it's definitely laid a career path for me that I am really looking forward to going into.
That sounds brilliant. And what are your kind of aspirations once you complete your apprenticeship? What are you hoping to do after that?
So at the moment, I'm currently a document controller, and I want to be a office manager and then work my way up. So I think construction, obviously, it's a lot easier for me to then see different sectors branch off, and office manager is probably where I want to be. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. So Rob, you've been involved in the development of a new apprenticeship standard, as you mentioned earlier, which was, really had this issue of social impact kind of at its heart, I think. Can you tell us a little bit more about the thinking behind that, and kind of how that's progressed? Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, absolutely, Anna, and it's great to hear Echo talking about their journey, and I think Echo, if you're interested in corporate responsibility and sustainability as an apprenticeship, there is a level 4 apprenticeship, which I'll tell you a little bit about now. So we all know that the transition to a net zero low carbon economy is critical for the economy, for society, and for the future of our country. And I think there are about 200 green skills apprenticeship standards now in the country, which is fantastic. And I think there's a lot of new apprenticeship standards about to come online in kind of retrofit, a lot in your Valeria in Evolves in the construction arena, around retrofits and kind of EV charging point installers and maintenance. It's really quite an exciting area. And I think for young people in particular, or for more mature workers who may want to transition into this type of occupation, there's such a huge amount and variety of different apprenticeship standards. And so, one of the areas which I've been involved in my profession for about 13 years is corporate responsibility and sustainability. And like many fairly new professions, through nobody's fault of their own, it becomes quite homogenous and quite, dominated by degree level type vacancies, etc. And one of my bugbears a few years ago was that the number of young people who wanted to get into CRS but just couldn't find an entry level route in. So we set about creating an apprenticeship standard, recruited a trailblazer group, worked with the institute, and over the period of 2 years, we created a level 4 apprenticeship, which is the corporate responsibility and sustainability practitioner. It was launched in 2021, and now there are about 130 CRS apprentices employed by about 80 plus businesses right across the country as well, I should add, not just in London. Just under half are actually based in London and the southeast. But actually the northeast, where I'm from, the northwest, Midlands, etc. And it's great to see just the kind of variety of businesses as well. So lots in the construction industry. We've got a football club. We've got some charities, local authorities, law firms, banks. Pretty much every sector imaginable. So it's been a real pleasure, and it was great that during the King's coronation, this particular standard, along with 5 others, was chosen as part of the coronation's focus on education and skills, which was a real kind of surprise and honor, I guess. So again, this is a great standard for small businesses. We actually designed the qualification and the kind of knowledge, skills and behaviours that underpin the standard with a number of small businesses as well, and also with another charity called Heart of the City, who many of you will know, who work with small and medium-sized employers as well. So it's a very sector agnostic and deployable for any business of any shape and size. It's been a great journey so far.
Brilliant, thanks, Robin. I think it's really interesting to hear, you know, that's a very different dimension of thinking about apprenticeships and social impacts, but a really powerful one. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, we've got time for some Q&A, and I wondered if I might jump in with something just building on what Rob was mentioning earlier before we go to some things that our audience have posted. Just thinking about the green skills issues, and, you know, obviously skills that are going to be very much in demand in future if we're going to reach those net zero targets, and interested, we've kind of heard where they fit in terms of the CRS apprenticeship, but maybe from others, kind of where you think that agenda fits in terms of the impact that we want apprenticeships and the levy to be having. Deborah, where does that fit in terms of Houslo's thinking at the moment?
I think it's fairly front and centre, actually. We're doing quite a lot, actually. We have a green skills project, and sitting within our work and skills team, we actually have some boot camps that we're doing quite well with. So that involves energy assessors. So we put some of those through, and also some landscapers at the moment. So, you know, it's just particular areas, but, you know, we're looking more at retrofit and different skills areas. So it's good news, and it's upskilling. These are kind of pre-apprenticeship level at the moment, but actually, you know, they will move forward to an apprenticeship vacancy once that arises. So yeah, we're with it.
Brilliant, thanks, Deborah. And Valeria, is this something that you're thinking about at Evolve as well, and seeing the demand for from employers as well?
Yes, definitely. We're not there yet, but we've got Terry, who's on the call as well. She's our partnership manager, and there's a lot of work taking place in the background to get us there. There's, as I mentioned, the skill shortage crisis, that the current labour are getting older, and unfortunately we don't have enough young people coming into the industry. So definitely one that Evolve will be focusing on in the next year.
Okay, thank you. Lots to be done on that front for sure. Brilliant. So moving to, sorry, Rob, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so can I just chip in on that, because it is, you know, the skill shortage is, you know, it's a phrase that we hear often, and I use it as well, but actually I don't think it's a skills shortage, it's a kind of an awareness shortage. Of, you know, if you go into colleges around the country, or you go into school settings and you speak to teachers, they're simply not aware of the volume and diversity of apprenticeship standards out there. And also there is still, and I think it's changing, I think there is still particularly for more affluent families, apprenticeships are seen as, you know, not the traditional route, and that is changing actually, because if you look at the legal sector, you know, there's a huge push now on solicitor apprenticeships, and which is fantastic, because this will provide an alternative pathway into a very traditional sector. But actually there's been some research published quite recently that there's been and I don't like to use some of these phrases, but a kind of middle class grab of apprenticeships like solicitor apprenticeships, where they're degree level, and parents are kind of who are more active in their child's kind of career and education, are wising up to the cost of university and seeing apprenticeships as a way to essentially save funding. So it goes back to your point, Anna, a little bit at the beginning, whereas, you know, what are apprenticeships for? You know, what is are they to address skill shortages, or talent, or social mobility, etc. And so I think all of this kind of systems change conversations, you know, need to take place, because there's so much talent out there. I think there's just and so many skills and enthusiasm and passion. It's just a lack of awareness.
Because we at Evolve, apart from apprenticeships, we do lots of like pre-apprenticeship programs to educate people, because specifically in construction, unfortunately, apprenticeships are being seen like last option, when it shouldn't. And I say most of the professionals in construction industry started as an apprentice, and is an amazing opportunity. Is not a last option, is the best option. That's how we see it at Evolve. And we do a lot of work to educate. I think we're doing more work like on the candidate side to work with people who are not ready for an apprenticeship yet, but we are providing them with the information that they need and a bit of work experience for them to try it and see whether it's the right fit for them, to get rid of the stigma around apprenticeships in construction.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think there's, there's a real opportunity with the need for green skills and, roles that are linked to the kind of wider green agenda and net zero, etc. That, we know a lot of school leavers are looking for opportunities to make that impact, this generation more than ever before. And actually, the more we can really tap into that motivation to create the opportunities and provide those pathways into the work that we really are going to need people to do. It feels as though there's a win-win there, but the jigsaw's not quite fitting together just yet. Wonderful. So we've got a question from someone in the audience today. I think a kind of two-parter for you, Rob and Deborah, around what you see as the value of levy transfer for your organisations, how you see that delivering value back for yourselves, and what, if anything, you're asking of the organisations who are in receipt of your funds. And maybe I'll just touch upon what we at the LPC ask of SMEs who are in receipt of those funds first of all, which is essentially as light touch as we can be. We would rather support than kind of put barriers in place to make sure that as many small businesses as possible who can offer high quality opportunities are able to. And we know that the small businesses will already have providers asking things of them, etc. So we want our role to be as light touch as possible. We do put some requirements from our perspective around salary levels on employers, because we want to make sure that apprentices are, particularly in London, able to live on the salary that they're offered for their apprenticeship. And beyond that, the agreement that sits with the ESFA, that sits within the Digital Apprenticeship Service, really covers the kind of legal and technical requirements there. So beyond that, our asks of employers are really about informing us of any changes, whether it's directly themselves or whether it's via their providers. And keeping in touch so that we can collect some case studies that we can then feed back to levy donors to help them talk about the impact that that their levy donations are having. And I know, for example, we have a large organisation who are a national supermarket chain who transfer some levy with us, and they use those case studies to put up on the kind of staff notice boards of the nearest branch, just to kind of bring that that activity with the levy home to a really kind of local level. And I think that's a lovely example of how some of that can kind of widen the story of impact that organisations are able to share. But Deborah, maybe if I can come to you just to talk a little bit about where you see the value of levy transfer for you, and what, if anything, you're asking of organisations who are in receipt of those funds.
Okay, so for us, really, it's about building resilient communities who can actually withstand sort of economic changes nationally and locally. And so it is that whole upskilling piece. We have kind of committed to working with employers paying the London living wage, and we've just commissioned a piece of work around that. Really, I think that's it in a nutshell. We do understand that, that employers don't necessarily have to pay that rate when they're taking on an apprentice, but in our experience, there tends to be a large churn of young people in particular who maybe don't have access to other kinds of like universal credits, that type of thing, to like top up. But we actually want to sort of build capacity into people and move away from that. And also, I tend to talk to employers about, building a local community of staff, and actually, apprenticeships do bring about loyalty. And, we are very much on the localism agenda, And we're finding more and more since coming out of the pandemic, our residents don't necessarily want to travel into central London. And, you know, that brings in itself extra time issues and also cost. So, you know, we're just trying to work locally in our key sectors, and, you know, the message is actually going through, and we're getting a good turnaround on investment on that.
Right, thanks, Deborah. And Rob, how about you?
Yes, I mean, I guess, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we weren't particularly focused, I guess, in terms of alignment with our ESG strategy at Weil in terms of levy transfer. We just wanted to support the sectors which have been hit most by the pandemic. I mean, I think when we made those transfers, you know, we obviously conducted the checks that satisfy our internal compliance, but we actually didn't ask for that much from the recipients of the levy transfer, which I kind of feel touches upon your point, Anna, around, you know, these are small businesses who are dealing with kind of huge challenges around staff shortages and the pandemic, etc. So we were just very happy for that particular period for our levy to be transferred and for it to have some degree of impact. I think going forward, you know, there's been multiple things I've been discussing with the LPC. You know, one of them is, you know, around solicitor apprenticeships. You know, there's about 170,000 solicitors in England and Wales. And actually most of them are employed by smaller high street solicitors firms. They're not necessarily all employed by the big law firms. And most of the law firms or solicitors firms in England and Wales are non-levy paying employers. So I think there's an opportunity for the legal sector to transfer unspent levy to smaller firms so they can recruit solicitor apprenticeships. And that's something which I think, you know, would be quite easy to do, and something that I'd like to pick up with LPC soon.
Great, I think that's really interesting, and it echoes, I know, not something we've been directly involved in so much, but you know, I know within the NHS there's been some really great work transferring funds from you know, from large NHS trusts into, you know, small primary care settings to kind of help make sure that those avenues are available. And, you know, with the I think approval of the new standard for medical practitioners last week, you know, there's a whole new avenue there for potentially opening up, you know, another avenue into a really great profession there. But yeah, you know, interesting potential similar model from large legal firms into, as you say, the kind of high street solicitors.
But Anna, sorry, just to say, I mean, it's very interesting. You mentioned that medical practitioner route, which I don't know if you picked up any of the press and any of the, you know, I'm a bit of a Twitter like lover hater. I spend a lot of time on Twitter for news and for everything, and it's amazing. It kind of feeds into this narrative around apprenticeships more generally, this kind of snobbery, you know, the amount of comments and some of the articles around, you know, an apprentice being a doctor was quite remarkable. So that's the narrative which is just embedded within this in society about apprenticeships, and I think that's a key part of what the Institute for Apprenticeships should be looking at, as well as employers and other actors within the ecosystem.
Indeed, yes, I agree. I think there were some very revealing comments, and, you know, particularly for a profession where we know actually, you know, medical students do spend a huge amount of time learning in the workplace already. So actually, you know, if there's anything perhaps that lends itself to that model, it's, you know, it could be that. Wonderful. So moving us on to another couple of questions that we've had from our audience about accessing levy transfer funds. And I'll talk a little bit about how we go about supporting that from an LPC perspective. But maybe to come to you, Valeria, it would just be interesting to hear about your experience from Evolve of kind of accessing that funding and how that process has worked from your perspective.
Yes, LPC made it easy. I don't know how we would do it without your support. And I was saying to Emma, that AJ couldn't join a meeting, and I was like, are you okay? You can't leave us. We really rely on you to support us. It's easy, and not having a levy transfer, for example, sorted in time can cause delays and put a lot of pressure on us. And then you realize more how much do we actually need it. But yes, I understand that, you know, the levy transfers can be technical, and I'm the only one in my team who knows how to do it and does it. But once you start doing it, you understand it's not as scary as it can sound and look like. So yes, thank you very much for your help with that.
Thank you. And just to answer the question a little bit more broadly, so companies, as I think someone else has mentioned on the Q&A, you can go onto the government portal and look for organisations who are willing to transfer funds. And that asks you to enter information about the standard you're looking for support for, your sector, the level of the apprenticeship, and where you are geographically speaking. And that system then looks to match you up with potential levy donors. So that is, you know, it's not kind of supported in perhaps the way that we do, but that is something that is open to any small businesses, any providers to look at on behalf of businesses you'll work with. You know, where we can't necessarily match businesses with levy donors within our networks, we also support them to look to see if that's a route for particular funding. But then there are also organisations like ourselves who perhaps support the process a little more directly, particularly in terms of that kind of matching process, and you know, having, you know, we have that understanding of what our donors are willing to support and what their motivations are. We are able to understand a little bit about the small businesses and therefore look for those good matches where there's a kind of alignment of, you know, whether it's sector, whether it's the particular apprentice and their story, whatever it might be. And you know, we can also therefore go to our donors and say, look, this isn't particularly within the scope of what you've told us you're interested in, but we think there's a really good case for you supporting it. Is it something you're willing to consider? And you know, as Rob was kind of indicating in terms of how restrictive or flexible different organisations are able to be, you know, we have a lot of those conversations to just kind of stretch the boundaries of what some of our donors feel able to support, and encourage them perhaps to think a bit differently about the impact that their funds might make. You know, that's the way we work in London. We work both directly with smaller businesses who come to us themselves, but also through a large network of training providers who are operating within London, and you know, very happy to have conversations with others that we're not currently working with, you know, particularly if you've found perhaps the online portal isn't producing the results that you're looking for, to see if there are things that we can help with there, or if we can just help to kind of speed that process up by matching you with people within our network. For those who aren't in London, obviously our remit is principally within London at the moment, although we're also doing a little bit of work in the Northwest for the DFE. But there is a network of apprenticeship hubs, which doesn't have kind of full coverage across England, but we do therefore have contacts through some of the other combined authorities, some kind of smaller areas, working through local enterprise partnerships, that kind of thing. So there may well be people that we can put you in touch with who might be able to look for support for you in other parts of the country as well. So hopefully that helps to kind of answer that question. And then yes, we've had others on the call pointing out others at the event pointing out other opportunities to make those matches happen. So particularly the co-op working outside of London, looking to support those matches as well. So lots of potential routes to look for people who can help you, perhaps above and beyond the kind of technical service that's offered by the government service as well. Brilliant. So I've got a kind of big picture, blue sky thinking kind of question now as well. which I think is really interesting. The question is that if you could invest more in apprenticeships, not just through transferring levy, or perhaps to use unspent levy to support things that it can't currently do, but what else would you want to see supported, I suppose, to help apprenticeships make that bigger impact? And make that kind of wider social impact. So good blue sky thinking about what else we could do with those unspent funds, or with kind of further investment. And Valeria, you talked a bit about the kind of wider pastoral support that you offer for apprentices. So I wondered, maybe in answer to that question, if we could come to you just to tell us a bit about what that kind of wider support need that you're seeing from your young apprentices is.
Yes. In general, before the pandemic and after the pandemic, mental health is a big one for us. Unfortunately, as you know, in the construction industry, mental health crisis, it's still a silent killer. So to provide that pastoral support, all of our apprentices have a dedicated apprenticeship manager that it's in touch with our apprentices anytime. I personally use my personal phone, and I can take calls from apprentices any time of the day or the night. We visit them at least every 4 weeks, and we have a community to support if signposting or referral is needed. The most important bit is that we work with the local authority, we work with the host employer and with the training providers to make sure that we together create a team to help that apprentice. So yes, and we recently, in the last couple of years, started to get more involved with employability support. So we start a program before our apprentices start on site, where we look at more like soft skills and learning and development to provide them with that extra support that they need to go on a site, which sometimes it's not so an easy environment to be in. Yes, that's what we did evolve. And I would say we partner a lot with a lot of other social value organizations who can support us where we feel we don't have the in-team knowledge and skills. So we always make sure that we have this big network of people who can help that one person.
Brilliant, and speaks again to what you were saying earlier about the importance of that kind of ecosystem of organisations in this space, doesn't it? Brilliant, thanks, Valeria. Rob, coming to you on that one. So, you know, if we could invest more, whether it's through the levy or whether it's through other funding in this kind of world of apprenticeships for social value, what would you want to see happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, I guess, you know, I know the government recently increased the bursary for young care leavers to £3,000, which I think is great. And I know there's lots of different pots of funding for particular demographics of apprentices and incentives for businesses of different shapes and sizes to hire apprentices. I mean, I do think the salary bands for apprentices, the kind of minimum wage is much less than a non-apprentice. I think for those who are aged, I should have had a look at this really, but I think for those aged under 23, it's round about £7.50 an hour. I might be wrong there. Somebody, if anybody's on the chat or anybody on this call wants to correct me, but I would bring apprenticeship salaries in line with entry-level salaries that are non-apprenticeship standards, if that makes any sense, because it actually, you know, if you're a young person, particularly if you're from a low-income family or you face multiple challenges, then the incentive to take an apprenticeship at the age of, say, 17 or 18 is not that great, because the education system isn't saying to you, do an apprenticeship, saying that's what success looks like. You're also probably gonna, there's probably a lack of support in giving you the information on what range of different apprenticeship standards are out there. Then also the hourly rate, you're paid much less than you would be if you went and got a job in a coffee shop or a mechanics, you know. So I think I would change that. And if that meant surplus levy could be used to top up salaries for those under the age of 23 or 21. I think somebody's just put a Oh, there's an event on that actually. The LPC is running an event on that. Brilliant. So that would be one of my things as well.
Brilliant. And we released some polling during National Apprenticeships Week around that issue, and I think it was up in the 70s, kind of low 70%, somewhere 72% or something like that, of people said that that apprenticeship minimum, as it stands, they didn't consider to be livable. So, I think you're very much in line with public opinion on that one. Deborah, what would you say if you could put some more funding into something in this kind of world of apprenticeships and social impact? Where would you want to see investment?
I think I echo what panelists was talking about, really sort of topping up any of the earlier sort of, the 16 to 18, the 19 plus, etc., up to London living wage for those in London, and even for the 25 plus as well. But also sort of looking at a sort of a broader picture, really, of maybe supporting care experienced young people with or adults with SEND levels, really talking about supported apprenticeships. I think that's something that really needs to be developed quite a lot more. And I understand that within the supported apprenticeship agenda, maybe access to work, where you might need equipment or that type of thing, needs to be applied for by the apprentice themselves, but maybe using some of the unspent funds as a buffer for, I don't know, different types of keyboards, maybe access to work, widening a doorway so that somebody, a wheelchair user, for example, has access into a workplace. That there's lots going on really around that. I would also say, young people who might have sort of faced other disadvantage through youth offending, actually helping them to turn around, because, sometimes that could be through sheer economics and disadvantage that's actually take them to that place anyway. So just leveling out the field, really. I think that's what
Thank you. And that reminds me of the additional incentive payments for taking on apprentices that were available during the pandemic, and really interesting ways that we saw some of the employers we were working with put that to use as a subsidy for salary, so that they could, so they were able to offer a little bit more, and to support with providing equipment, particularly for people who were needing to study remotely and perhaps didn't have that connectivity or that equipment at home to do so. So, I think it's very interesting to see where those subsidies were offered, actually the kind of creative ways that employers were putting them to use to support people who might otherwise have experienced barriers. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to come to each of you for a kind of closing remark in a moment, if I may. Just the one thought that you'd like to leave our audience with if they're thinking about the impact that their funds could have. While you have a think about that, as I mentioned at the start, this event is part of our K2 series, which is supported by funding from Youth Futures Foundation, and we're really keen to make sure we're creating opportunities for those we work with to share best practice both within and beyond our network. And it's been great to see some familiar names popping up in the chat and the Q&A, but also some people that I don't think we've spoken to before. So really lovely to have you joining us today. As my colleague Emma mentioned, and prompted by Rob's comments, our next event will be on the 27th of July, and we'll be discussing fair pay and good work for apprentices then. The link to book is in the chat, but we'll also share that after the event, and we'd really love to see as many of you there as are not on holiday at that point in the year. But yeah, it would be really great to see lots of people there to discuss what's obviously a really key issue in terms of making sure that apprenticeship opportunities really are accessible to perhaps the groups that really have the most to benefit from them. So if I can come back to each of you in the 4 minutes we have left for a quick kind of closing thought, the one thing that you'd like our audience to take away today if they're thinking about the impact that their levy funds can make. And Valeria, if I could come to you first.
I think it's important. There's challenges, there's opinions, but I think it's very important to keep in mind that levy transfers are impactful and not transactional, and that impact is at very different levels. We saw ECHO, so it's helping the apprentice, it's helping SMEs to achieve the social impact mission, it's helping an industry, and in the end, it's helping a country, and I can go as far as the world. So I think the impact of that one transfer is actually unmeasurable.
Thank you. Deborah, how about you? Quick thought.
I just think really it's an opportunity not to be missed, really, to plug skills gaps. There's businesses, where there's skills, they need to bring in new skills, and it's a perfect way to either upskill talent, bring on new apprentices, and an excellent tool for that.
Wonderful. And Rob, finally, can come to you.
I mean, it's a no-brainer, really, isn't it? I mean, why not? That's the thing, why not? If you've got surplus levy funds, why not put them to good use if you can't use them within your own business? So why not? I would contact the LPC, just to do a little plug, actually, because my HR colleagues actually told me that we have lots of surplus funding that we're keen to spend. So if you are looking for levy transfer, please contact the LPC and we will give it to you via the LPC.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you for those closing comments. You can make an impact on the world, and it's a no-brainer. What more do we need? And Valeria, do pass on our thanks to Echo as well. It was really, really wonderful to hear. Always good to hear an apprentice's perspective. Yeah, wonderful to hear from her about her journey to her apprenticeship and her aspirations for the future. So that brings us to a close today. Thank you for lots of great chat and lots of great questions. And thank you particularly to our panelists. Have a wonderful day, and we very much hope to see as many people as possible at our next event, talking about fair pay and good work on the 27th of July. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.